All right. Hello, this is Lisa Miller, and you're listening to Selling to Healthcare, where we have some really interesting conversations about how do you sell to healthcare, whether that's hospitals, payers, physician offices, or other kinds of healthcare organizations. And so today I'm really excited because this launches a new reboot to the podcast in an area that I really wanted to go into. It's really getting the insights from sales leaders and from experts. And so today we have Tim Boyle. He is the Director of Sales and Business Development at Riva Global Medical. And we're really, really happy because I love what he sells and what his company does. So Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. I'm excellent. So I just as a background, because I found your background really interesting. I just want you to tell us a little bit about you. I think you are a professional hockey player, which is interesting. And then why and how you got into healthcare sales. Just give our audience a little bit of background about you.
Sure, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So I am actually one of 12. I have 12 brothers and sisters, one of 13. So an
Wow.
Irish Catholic family from south of Boston. My parents, obviously, they're saints, but we were a very close-knit family who just really enjoyed doing things together. So my older brother was a very good hockey player from a very young age, and he was 8 years older than me. So I was able to look up to him as sort of a mentor slash older brother that you want to just be like. So I myself got into the hockey world, and fortunately enough, I was able to play Division I hockey, get drafted to the Ottawa Senators in the fourth round, and play a little bit of professional hockey, which was pretty cool. But so the reason what got actually me into the medical field was I have going back to my family that I was just talking about. Our oldest sister, Jen, she's a doctor, so healthcare has been big for us throughout our whole life. My dad was given 6 months to live; he beat it. So we have a lot of stories in the health industry that just I've had so many people that have served us in the healthcare industry. So I felt like once I was done playing hockey, it was my turn to serve back. So that's
Oh,
what
that's
got me into the medical field.
that's awesome. Great, great, great story. Wow, one of 13.
Yeah,
Like
there's a
people,
lot of us.
yeah. So let's jump in. You know, I think one of the areas that um I hear most often is getting the appointment, getting the meeting, but after that, it's really some of those objections, right? So, I'm always interested in kind of strategy and tactics. So, what
Right.
are some of your strategies for handling objections in enterprise sales, specifically around whether that we do this internally? I used to hear that a lot when I sold my consulting services and even technology. We do that internally, or we have technology, or we have an outside service provider. So, how do you address that? Like, really comprehensively, like, what do you do, say,
Yeah.
provide?
No, that's a great question, Lisa. And honestly, the way we look at it here at Riva is we're consultative sellers. So it's going to be a case by case basis. And of course, you're going to see different bottlenecks, different pain points at every different practice, whether you're dealing with a big hospital, a smaller practice, or even like physical therapy. So what we like to do is we ask a certain number of discovery questions. And like you said, we do handle those objections. We get bounced back a lot from whether they have, like you said, having in-house systems or if they outsource their billing. We do find ways to jump around those objections, but it's all about case by case, right? The healthcare industry right now, like healthcare costs are rising. So we're going to do anything that we can as a healthcare practice to cut costs and increase revenue so our patient care can be much better. But that's different for every separate practice. So I can't go into one place saying, okay, the last hospital I talked to, their front desk staff is overworked and they're missing claims on the back end. So this is what's going to happen at this. It's so different from each practice and it's case by case basis. So really, we just like to be consultants, ask what's going on, ask a few, we call them discovery questions, just of how the practice flows. And from there, we just do our studying to see if there's anything our medical professionals can help with at a cheaper price and if it would be more efficient in your workflow.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's true, really having um, those discovery questions, that bank of questions available and practicing and being able to be in the moment, to be a consultant, because you never know, like you said, what you're going to get thrown at you, right? Every hospital, every presentation's different, every person's different. And so you just have to be ready, really ready to be able to be that consultant in the moment. And I think
Exactly.
that's the key. Um, so that was a great entry into you telling us what Riva Global Medical does. So, like, I really want the audience to hear exactly what you do, what you provide, why you're different. Just give us a couple of minutes of you and what you're doing in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Riva Global Medical, we provide medically virtual professionals to healthcare practices globally. So it's like I said earlier in this conversation, it could be anything from a physical therapy to a small practice to a big hospital, even to a laboratory. Anything that has anything really that has a workflow with front desk management and back end billing, and then patient communication or having to deal with tests or intake. We can sit anywhere along that workflow by providing a medically trained virtual professional. They all are outsourced from the Philippines. But the reason that we have, the reason why we've been so successful is because of the value they bring to practices, right? So ever since COVID happened, it's been tough to get people, all not tough, but people are more comfortable with working from home than coming back into the office. And once we found out at COVID that a nurse can work from home and do some of the same practices from home that she can do at the office, it makes that workflow a little easier. And that's where we came up with the idea of outsourcing that to the Philippines, having these medically trained professionals come on the call that can do the same work as that office admin, but for a fraction of the price. So if we're going to talk about pricing, when you hire an office admin, you're typically, and obviously this is a case by case basis, but throughout the states, it's usually 70 grand that you're paying to that person yearly for that office admin. And we like to, and so at Riva Medical, we'll charge you $12 an hour for our medically trained virtual professionals. So that's saving around $40,000 per VA. So if you're having more than one VA, obviously these would be bigger practices, but the bigger practices that are hiring more than one, they have two, three, four, they're able to save that money, and they're also to collect more because that work that they're, not only is their patient care going to be better because those people are allocating their resources to better time, not just chasing down paperwork, but also they're going to be able to provide more tests. They're going to be more scheduling. They're going to be more intake. They're going to be able to do just so much more by outsourcing that VA.
Yeah, I have a couple questions about what you just said, and I have a antidote and a validation. So I have a very good friend of mine who happens to be a nurse, and the she works in an office. The doctor is just a really amazing doctor. He spends a lot of time with patients, but he likes to have his nurse right next to him, taking notes. He just goes so deep, and he's offering just a tremendous amount of recommendations, both, like MD, regular, traditional, and also some natural ways, to help his patient. He gets complex patients, so he really needs that nurse there transcribing, pulling it all together. I say all that because my friend during COVID went to Florida from New Jersey and was able to keep her own job doing that. She would call in
Mm-hmm.
to his appointments. And again, he does a complex practice with patients and a lot of the elderly patients too. So she calls in and does the same thing she did prior to just sitting next to him.
Yeah, right.
And it worked beautifully. It had no bumps, hiccups, and it worked. And he was used to her and how it worked. And she was still able to engage with the patients, no hiccups. So I want to say, like, I know that firsthand that it works.
Yes, and I appreciate that because that's exactly what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Is trying to get that same quality of care,
Hmm.
but being able to outsource it for a much cheaper price. Obviously, I don't want to talk about that nurse because she was probably very, very educated and trained. So I don't want to say there was a competition there because she probably was unbelievable at what she does. But that was the exact business model we brought in, right? So that's what we want to do. We just want to make it more easier for these practices, just because if you can outsource and save money, you're going to be able to, I know I'm being a little bit redundant here, but you can just expand your practice. You can make your patient care that much better. So if we took a step back and we
Hmm.
looked at it from an entire workflow,
Hmm.
and I just was to talk about before, so we look at it in four phases, right? Before the patient's seen,
Hmm.
when the patient gets there, while the patient is being seen, and then after the patient leaves. So when we look at the before the patient is seen, you look at those things like the appointment scheduling and the prior authorization. That's going to be something that's handled by the front desk. Our MVPs can handle that pretty easily. That's 2 to 3 days before with a follow-up to make sure you don't deal with any of those no-shows or appointment just misses. Secondly would be when the patient gets there, which would be the patient intake or the front desk management, where they're running eligibility on the insurances for all those patients. And then the third step would then we get into that insurance verification and the demographic changes, and then that, like your nurse friend was, that scribe for the doctor. And we can be right in there, like you said, call in via video, and there aren't really many hiccups because obviously the language is spot on. For every 100 people that we vet out, we only hire 5 MVPs because obviously patient care, that communication is very important. And you need to be able to communicate back and forth, not only to the patients, but to the doctors. And then also we're going to be able to have them trained on your EMR, EHR. So they have to have the capability to run all EMRs and EHRs in the healthcare systems. So when we are talking, and I'm going back into the workflow, when we talk about our workflow from, let's just say the front end to the back end. So the back end billing, from the appointment scheduling to the back end billing, there is one spot in every part of your workflow that one of our MVPs can sit.
Yeah, that's I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but I'm glad you mentioned that now in the conversation. I actually think what you're offering is brilliant. I mean, we have lots of shortages. Do you also, when you talk about medically trained virtual professionals, right? Your MVPs, are they equivalent to an MA, or is it an office admin? Like where's the equivalency, Tim?
A little bit higher trained than an office admin.
Right.
They're not. We do have some registered nurses that work as VAs because in the Philippines, obviously the
Yes.
opportunity to work in America is great,
Yes.
and they're unbelievable workers for us. Some of them, but if I'm talking to you and on a broader scale, I would say that they have a little better training than a typical office admin.
Right. And right. Okay. So so a little bit higher than an office admin, probably more not equivalent to an RN, even though, right, there's a lot of Filipino professionals, clinical clinicians who I've known through the years that work here in the US, and they're amazing clinicians. But you would say like a little bit in between, even like what we consider like a medical assistant. So kind of in
Yes.
our MAs would be the equivalent, right?
Yes. What we
So
do though, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, so one thing we will do to ensure that our quality is that we will eat the cost to train them on your EMR and EHR for the first month. So we'll put our money where our mouth is because we really believe in improving ourselves to you, but also giving that VA time to learn the systems, the EHR, EMR.
Yeah.
So just a little extra training before they
Yeah,
start
no,
out into their field.
that makes a ton of sense. So let's go back to sales, and I'll end with a little bit more about Riva Global. So talk to me about, like, right, you mentioned, so you mentioned a little bit about offering a risk-free, friction-free process up front by not charging them initially for the first month. So that's kind of like a really smart way to really, prove and stand behind what you're doing. Are there any pilots or anything that you also do, or what signals do you look for? Like if you have 1 or 2 of your MVPs to expand, like talk a little bit about, like we're helping other sales reps. So like, how would you tell a sales rep, like, hey, a pilot
Okay, yeah.
program work, pilot is great. And then once I've sold, maybe 1 or 2 of my MVPs, this is when I know to scale. Like just talk through you as a sales professional.
And that's actually an excellent question, and that is how I kind of learned the role and learned the space a little bit because, like I said earlier, they're going to be case by case basis. It's going to be different
Mhm.
everywhere. But one story I can tell you is we have an IVF practice where they were looking for help and they had a lot of bottlenecks throughout their entire workflow. But I had to kind of decide myself. They only had the budget for one VA.
Mhm.
So I needed to I had to ask myself, what's the most important thing coming in? What's the most important thing going out? And so we obviously were dealing with the front desk management and back end billing, but they also had some patient communication errors. And I felt from learning with this IVF practice, I decided to go to the front desk management, right? Because if you get stuff figured out at the beginning, it's easier than to not have to go track that stuff down. So if we place a VA at the beginning, maybe they can correct all those bottlenecks that are happening down the workflow before they even happen. Does that make sense, Lisa?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So you're really like proactive. You put in, you had one position to fill, and
Yep.
as a consultative way, you put the right person in the right place so that it would be obviously it's a right decision for the practice, right? But it was
Yep.
also pretty smart for you because you wanted to be successful.
Right.
And
And
so that sounds like you were very thoughtful. I think that's what sales is about. I think people think sales is about like, like trying to get an appointment, making the call, and,
right.
versus doing what you just did, which was how do I offer value?
It's the healthcare industry entirely. You cannot be a salesman. The salesy salesman is like what I like to call it. You need to be a consultant because
Yeah.
all these people are spending all of their time. I look at it as the clinical versus the clerical. They have
Hmm.
so much time that they have to spend on clinical work, doctors, nurses, but they also have to do clerical. So
Hmm.
there are so many different things that they are juggling. Where if you go in with a selfish mindset, there's not only for them, you're not going to help the patient, you're not going to help the practice, but you're not going to help yourself either.
Hmm.
So the biggest thing for healthcare, and as everybody should know or does know, is that they're trying to help people, and that's
Hmm.
what we're trying to bring to Riva Global Medical. We're trying to help these practices because obviously, with like I said earlier, the rising healthcare costs going up, we got to cut costs and increase revenue. So we thought of this idea. I went into this IVF practice with the front desk management. We brought the no shows down to 0%, which was great.
Whoa, wait a minute. Hold on, hold on. You brought the no shows to zero?
Yes.
That metric, I was going to ask you about metric. That's a phenomenal metric.
Yes, yeah. So that's what is, and I spoke about it very briefly earlier in our conversation. But that 2 day before phone call being like, "Hey, you got a meeting coming up. Are you sure going to be?" Opposed to just like an automated text being sent out, is just so much like that point of patient care from our VA has helped so much just because like we're there for you. And then after the test, when usually you don't, usually you'll get like, "Oh, these are your prescriptions you got to go get." Our VAs will reach out and say, "Hey, how are you doing? How did the test go? Is
Hmm.
everything okay?" So I know I've said this a couple times, putting our money where our mouth is, but we really preach like we're just trying to help. We're trying to provide the most seamless and best patient experience for not only the patient but for the doctor as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Um, let's dive into a couple of more sales advice. How do we help our fellow BD healthcare sales people? If you were giving advice to someone brand new in selling to healthcare, like in the first 60 days, um, what would you tell them they need to do? So that encompasses maybe what to read, what to
Oh yeah,
study, how do they do their daily schedule, like brand new. I remember when I was brand new and I was panicked by
yeah.
first 60 days. I
I've
just
been there.
I just like knocked on as many doors as possible. But
Yeah.
what would you tell a brand new salesperson?
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. It's
Yeah,
industry research,
yeah.
industry research, industry research. So for myself, and I didn't get into my previous jobs before, after hockey, and before Riva Global, but I spent a lot of time in the healthcare industry, and I've learned a lot along the way. But I think like the biggest thing is just going back to what are the most important things for each practice, right? What is this practice going to see? And then how am I going to relate what's going on in the industry today to that practice? And how am I going
Absolutely.
to help them with things that are going on? Now that this is a fine line here. I don't want you to go like I'm not telling someone if I'm someone's mentor, I'm not telling them to go look at industry websites, right? And look for pain points and try to go to the doctors and be like, hey, I saw that people are dealing with no pays or like there's reimbursement cuts that are going to happen. Are you sure you're on top of that? Because that goes back into that salesy salesman that I don't like to deal with.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if you look up on the industry that, like, for instance, many practices in Connecticut are going to have to deal with things in the future, and
Hmm.
you can help them get ahead of it, and then you can
Hmm.
be that sounding board once they are dealing with that. That'd be more of a consultative sale for me. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I love one of my favorite books is called it's the Challenger Sale. And they have this process which I've used since reading the book. It's commercial insights. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's like taking some things that may happen in the future, or some things that are unseen, and bringing net new information, because the reality is what you just said. They know that no pay or no shows or the deductibles are going up. They know those things. Those are obvious. Like, what are the maybe the hidden, less obvious things, and how do you put that together in a commercial insight so they've never heard it before? It takes a lot of work to do. And to your point, like in Connecticut, what are the future trends? That takes really a lot of work and a lot of thinking, and then pulling it together, which I think a lot of companies miss. They do not do that hard work.
I could not agree more there. 100%. Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you trends in your industry in a moment, but I want to ask you one more sales advisor question. So now you meet somebody that's been in the business 10, 15, 20 years in healthcare sales. What might you advice you might give them, right? Like, we all need advice. We all need to kind of look at things differently. Maybe it's a little bit more advanced. How do you choreograph the presentation better? How do you maybe teach or learn how to land whale deals, right? Those
Yes.
are so what would you teach?
I don't want to talk too much about people with 20-year experience where
Yeah. Yeah.
so I can only give you as much as I know, right?
Yeah.
But going after whales is relationships, right?
Mhm.
And you need to put your CFO hat on, and you need to think money in, money out the door as
Mhm.
a salesperson dealing with
Mhm.
these big whales. But the
Mhm.
relationship's the biggest thing. If I can give any word of advice to someone trying to get into like a big whale or a big, like I'm going to
Mhm.
use I'm in Connecticut here. So let's say Yale New Haven Health, big, huge
Mhm.
health system, right? Someone wants to get in that. I would say the biggest, obviously put your CFO hat on, money in, money out the door, but you got to you got to build a relationship first.
Mhm.
You got to have the conversation. You got to go out to lunch if they'll take it, obviously. But you're someone that's had experience. You should have a book of business at this point. You have your connections that you can get you can get yourself in front of those right conversations to have to the
Mhm.
right people, selling the right, not selling, but providing the right consulting.
Right. Yeah. Like, what big value can you talk about? Can you co-create or say, this is what I'm thinking, what are you thinking? And maybe there's an opportunity, to first put your, like you said, CFO hat on. How do
Yep.
you help them? How do
Hmm.
you give them, the things that they want? Like, they want success, they want vision, they want to present to the board in a way that
Yep.
that makes them look good. I mean, they have personal, professional goals. Like, how do you help them succeed in those?
Exactly. And so, yeah, so for like using myself as an example, so I came from the RCM space before.
Mhm. Yep.
So we obviously in the healthcare industry, now that there's a lot of these big RCM companies that are all over the place, just really cutting down those no pays and doing a lot of insurance verifications. So in my space, we can help obviously differently, but we can help in a similar way. So for me, I would use my connections to you get
Mhm.
those relationships to describe the value that you bring to the client by using your connections. So and to give you an example, these RCM companies, they can bring that denial rate, they can cut the no pays down to almost like, let's say it's 95%. But what's that extra 5%, that 95 to 100%? If you're at a Yale New Haven Health, what is 5% revenue to you? That is a lot of money, could be billions of dollars.
Mhm.
So what we tried to do and what I'm trying to do and what I would as a mentor say to somebody would be use your book of business, but not only that, use your experience. So for me, I knew that our medical virtual assistants can go in and they can find that 5% and they can bring the success rate from 95% up to 100. And then
Mhm.
if you're the RCM company and you can go to your client saying, I'm going to be able to cut down all those no pays, of course people are going to like to hear that, right? So that's just kind of the niche I did. I knew that I was coming from a space where insurance is difficult and it's tough to get paid out on claims, and doctors are very busy, labs are very busy. So the amount of like every no pay that you can cut down is very important. That's how I got into it. And then I just my knowledge expanded as I was learning the workflows.
Yeah, that's true. And I think you've mentioned it earlier, but I think it's key to understand our customers' workflows in every single way, shape possible. It's the frontline insights, it's the frontline work that they do in and out. The more you know and understand their frontline work, the better you can be as an advisor to them and be able to say, I think we could help here. Here's what I'm thinking about. About 2 months ago, I was with one of my clients on a sales call. It was actually in a hospital, and we just got to talking about several things like the OR and processes and all different things. And woman leaned over and she said, you really understand our process. You understand everything that goes in. She goes, it's so refreshing. Like, this is helpful in this process. She goes, so many, if not most of the reps that come in here don't understand really what happens day to day. And I think ultimately, like, that has to be every salesperson's goal, like understanding workflows, understanding what their day is like so that you can be helpful, right? And
Yeah,
like really, so you're helpful, then you become the trusted advisor, right? When you
exactly.
understand them. And so I love what you're doing because at the end of the day, everything about having a virtual assistant is about helping them day to day. Like,
Hmm.
that's it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
How many
We can
like
bring
you
the hockey back into it, right? It's all about being coachable. It is
about
all
being
about being coachable. So once you
yeah.
learn, then you can be the all-star. But until you learn, you got to be coached.
Yeah, it's right. It's all about being absolutely, which we might do another hockey analogy here, but so where do you
Um,
see that puck going? Like, where are the trends in the future?
yeah, absolutely. I think that it's going to obviously, as we know, face of care, like seeing someone's face when you go into the doctor's office is very important. There are some laboratories that are trying to get away from it with just like all virtual scanning kiosks. There's a couple different labs that do that, but I think it's very important to have a face at the point of patient care. But then expanding beyond that is what we talked about with hiring 4 or 5 of those office admins, opposed to having 3 or 4 VAs that are outsourced. You're just
Mhm,
going to be able to allocate that time, that money. And if
mhm.
you have a trained RN working as an office admin, they're doing clinical, or they're doing clerical work instead of the clinical work. And they went to
100%.
so many years of school to get to do that clinical work, and they have to do this back end work. It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, so I have another friend who's a nurse practitioner and she would see patients all day, but then on she would spend like three plus hours at the end of the day doing all that
It's
paperwork.
crazy.
Staying, it's crazy. So, I'll give you another analogy. When I know a lot of companies, even the big four, who for years, this is not anything new, they've been outsourcing their accounting work, right? Their
Yeah.
basic,
Mhm.
for these large companies, they'll just do some of the transactions so that they can get to the higher level strategic work they're outsourcing to the Philippines. And the things that I have seen, that they're able to do that work in the middle of the night, and then in the morning they get it. And so now you got this incredible flow of efficiency. So how does that work for you too on the back office side? Do you see a lot of those efficiencies too? So now they get into the office. Obviously, they're not patient contacts and they're not doing insurance verifications, but are you seeing the efficiency of having that time difference?
So, and I might have misheard your question, and I don't want to be boring here,
Yeah,
but you're exactly spot on with that.
yeah,
That's exactly how ours works too. Through the night, they work
yeah.
overnight in the Philippines, which is great, and it's efficient for the doctors. But and I might have heard you wrong here, but our MVPs are able to run insurance verifications, because they will track down that
Nice.
information personally,
Oh,
and they'll
okay.
actually record their calls to the insurance companies,
Oh,
so they have
wow.
proof of concept saying, "Hey, this is the insurance we provided, and it's actually the real insurance." So then there's nothing that insurance company can do to kind of reject that claim anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Hmm.
So as we wrap up, like,
Yeah.
two last questions. Is there any advice that you would give or learnings that you've had selling into healthcare? Number one.
And
Anything else?
sorry, can you just repeat that one more
Yeah,
time?
yeah. Any advice? Anything last minute? You may not have it, but just one last thought. What you've learned, something that comes to mind that's been important to you day to day, or as you work, advising and selling to healthcare.
I'm going to be redundant here, but you got to consult.
Yeah.
have to consult. You need to learn, like, you need to be a sponge, learn the workflow like you talked about, learn the systems, and really understand the practice. And
Yeah.
if you understand the practice, it's like a conversation you and I are having here, Lisa. It's not a sale, right?
100%.
So that's
Absolutely.
that's what I want to get to, and that's what I think everyone should strive to, right? So that would
Um,
be the advice I'd give.
yeah, no, that is the best advice, really. And then a little bit more about Riva Global. Like,
Yeah.
how do people reach out to you? Like, someone's listening, even though the audience is more selling into healthcare, but you never know who may be listening from a
Yeah.
physician's practice or others. So how do they, like, what's that first entry point? How do they reach out to you, or how do they get connected, or do you have a
Yeah.
presentation? What do you do?
So we like to keep things fun around here, right? So Bob, the owner, is actually a former professional hockey player as well. So we like to keep things fun, right? So we make Instagram videos. We got rivaglobalmedical.com. You can find
Mhm.
us on LinkedIn, my personal LinkedIn page, or the Riva Global Medical LinkedIn page. But we're everywhere you want to find us. There's links on our website if you want to click a button, you can find me. But LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, we got
Cool.
all the tools there.
Yeah, and we're going to have everything in the show notes. So, Tim, thank you. This has been a great conversation. You're doing an amazing job helping hospitals, which is what I'm all about. I'm all about helping the healthcare providers, like you said, provide excellent patient care, doing things in a cost-effective way. So, thank you for being a champion. And we look forward to hearing about Riva Global in a big way. Thank you for
Thank you
being
so
here.
much. Yeah, thanks for having me, Lisa. I had a blast. Thanks so much. Awesome. Well, let me know. Reach out if you need anything else from my end at all. I'm
Yeah,
here.
and I'll keep my ear out for places that may need your services too.
I'd appreciate that. Thanks, Lisa.
Great. All right.
All right.
See you
Bye
soon.
now.
Bye.